Welcome to our session where I'm going to be fabric painting. As you can see, I did a paper version first before I went and painted my fabric pillow slip. The first thing you'll have to do is set yourself up. You need to salvage some cardboard and measure it up for whatever area you're painting. Cut it to size. It could be the whole pillow slip, but I've chosen just this front panel where the stitching is. So I've inserted that in there, and that's going to stop paint transfer through the fibres. Then I'm going to grab some pegs, and because I'm using an easel to help my neck, I'm going to peg it as best I can to stop things moving around. Just a quick view of my workstation. It is organised, although it is messy. As to the specific pens and colours I used, we've got Life of Colour acrylic markers. They are from the Florals set. I used only one, the clear lid, from the Wildflowers set. And I have my Posca markers, the yellow, the big black, the fine black, and the fine gold that I used for the final highlights. Now, none of these pens have a smell, and that makes them extremely comfortable to use. This bit is boring, but important. Grab a tea towel, any cloth, put your iron on the highest setting that will be supported by your material. A pillow slip is cotton, so it can go really high. And then you put your iron on 30 seconds every section of the painting. When I've done that, I take the tea towel off. I do just to check that I'm not going to scorch when I go directly on or lift glitter paint. It's fine. And then I do it again. Plonk it on, hold it for 30 seconds until you've covered the entire painting. And then you're finished. Now, on this painting, what I'm pleased about is that I've got the paint all the way up to the edge. When I turn it over as well, you can see that the paint has travelled through. That's 2 layers there. So I've done a really good job at soaking that fabric in paint, and that's going to help longevity. There's no paint on the inner cover, and also it's why you need a cardboard protector when you paint. So here's the things that I've learned about fabric painting over the many times I've done it. 1, you are painting on fabric. That means iron it first. It gives you a smoother surface to work on, because every time you get a little wrinkle or a bunch, that's harder to get over with a pen. Also, you've got sewing often in fabric. So if you get a seam, or if you get thread, or you get a fold, all of those mean that it's a different texture. Be gentle, be careful, and remember it's fabric. So in order to be color fast, you want to get as much ink in there as possible. Which is why, if you were watching that time lapse, you might have noticed, it was going pretty quick, that I went over and over and over. Even when I was doing my outlining, I did several layers of the outline pen, and the reason why I used a fine pen after the thick pen was because it cleans up any edges. So that's the second thing to note with fabric. You don't have to be perfect. In fact, any artwork. Don't worry. Let the art take you on the journey, because we're doing it for fun. We're doing it for joy. And very often, what you think is terrible, what you think was an awful mistake, can become a feature, or it can just get disguised. So you'll notice that when I use the water pen, and that's another thing that I need to talk about, you can feather out the ink on fabric with that water pen if you're using these water-based acrylic pens. And you can get some watercolor effects. You have to work quickly. As soon as the pen is on the fabric, you need to get the water pen to draw it out. Ultimately, I decided not to use too much of that effect, but what you might have noticed is that I painted in a little bit more foliage, and that's because my bleed with the watercolor, it went in a place I wasn't really planning it for to go, and mistakes can get covered up. Okay, so remember that light goes on first usually, and dark will cover any mistakes. So that's how I usually work, with the light to the dark. The other thing you should note, or that I really enjoyed from Karen's tutorial, was about the light. She highlighted with a soft yellow, and that's how the yellow got into my design. So I did the yellow first because I wanted to block that in to make sure that came through cleanly at the end.
So working from light through to the darker shades is a better way, I find, on fabric because of the absorbency of the fibres. Let me check my notes, see if I've covered everything. Oh, okay, fabric. Despite our best efforts of setting up and pegging and making it straight, it's still going to snag with the pen. Okay, so these fabric markers, they come with a couple of different nib options. I was using a sort of a nib that's a little bit rough against fabric. It's not like a nice painting experience of a brush against a smooth background. Fabric has texture, and the nib of the pen has texture, and you're rubbing against it. Different fabrics are going to have different amounts of texture, so it is quite important that you choose a fabric that's going to work well. I'm trying to get something that's quite a tight weave so that it's smoother, and something maybe that's a little less fluffy or absorbent, because that also will factor into how much the ink feathers and bleeds. If it feathers and bleeds, you might give up and go to a different fabric, or you might very carefully conceal those little bumps with a little bit of extra something. People also want to know whether fabric paint can be blended. In terms of these pens, yes, but you have to be very, 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 very quick, and it will not be the same amount of blend. So you can't change the colour. You can't mix to create a new colour. You can blend through the colours a little bit, but you can't change the colour. So that's why I used an array of pens, an array of colours, because I couldn't just get a couple of nice ink pots and mix things together to create my own. The other thing you should see, I know I've showed it to you a little bit, is this is my scrap cardboard. That's quite important because the pens to make the to make the ink flow, you need to jab them sometimes, and sometimes when you're working on the fabric, the ink will stop flowing, so go back and jab on the cardboard and you'll get your ink flowing again. And of course you also have to have another inside. As you can see, that's the ink that goes through the fibers of the fabric that you're painting, and of course you need that to protect the other sides of the fabric. The last question I think will be, is it colour fast? Now, yes, it's colour fast. My experience as I've washed garments is that it will fade. So I'm planning to go back in and touch up the caps in this little picture that I'm going to show, because they faded out quite quickly. When I did this pillow slip, I really paid attention to going over my black a lot. Sometimes different brands of pens will have varying performance. I find Posca's to be very colour fast, or more colour fast than the Life of Colour ones. But I do like the Life of Colour ones because they've got the brush nib. So it's more like painting with a paintbrush, and it flows easier over the fabric. When you wash your garments, don't do what I did and forget about a gentle wash cycle. Sometimes my garments have just ended up in the wash on 40 degrees with everything else, and that does fade things a lot more. But they're still quite wearable, and I take it as a feature of the artwork, a feature of my enjoyment of it and my wearing of it. It fades. I can always go back in and update it because I've got all the materials, and well, that's what we can do when we do DIY. So I really hope you give fabric painting a go. I've only covered off Posca markers and the Life of Colour markers, so acrylic water-based markers on a cotton fabric. If you're working on a t-shirt, please be aware that the fabric of that t-shirt is likely to bleed more because it's a little bit more absorbent. Don't give up. Remember, art creates itself in a lot of cases. You might end up with something that wasn't in your head but is equally stunning. Don't worry about trying to match the colours that I did or trying to match the colours that Karen did. This art is for you. You can do any flight of fancy, and you'll see how my art was so wildly different to what Karen's was, but we drew on that as inspiration, and that's what this exercise is about. I hope you have a great deal of fun and enjoy your comfy life. I'm going to speak a little bit more about what's coming up next with the help of some pictures. Bye for now.
Our next project involves putting a panel on a garment. It won't be as complicated as this. It will have very, very minimal sewing, and you can use any garment that you choose. In the meantime, Karen and I would love to see your versions of Easter lilies. Please put your pictures into the Facebook group that's listed underneath this video in the describe box. We'd love to see what you got up to, and Karen has already posted her version on Fabric, and it's amazing. We look forward to seeing you over in the Facebook group.